If new construction is not your thing, I may have found the house for you. Technically, this house was built millions of years ago when giant boulders formed a circle in the desert north of Scottsdale, Arizona.
This is the Upper Sonoran Desert. And if you go back 1,000 years, use your imagination, there were ancient peoples, natives camped all around this rock, and it turns out that they used this as kind of a solar observatory.
In the early 1980s, the land was purchased and listed for sale.
And a couple in the northwest part of the country saw a little ad in a paper years ago, back in the late 70s, and it said, "Who will buy my beautiful pile of rocks?" And they thought, well, that's kind of intriguing. Then they jumped on a plane and they came down here, and they basically fell in love with the peace and the quiet and the views. And they decided to make an offer on it. They were originally going to build a house in front of the rocks. So they hired a noted New Mexico architect named Charles Johnson. And he took a look at the pile of rocks and he said, "You're making a huge mistake. There's no house I could design that would take away from these incredible rocks." He said, "Let's see if we can build a house in the rocks."
And the Boulder house was born.
Square footage used to be stated as 8,500 square feet, but it's really about 4,500 square feet. You know why? Because the standard definition of finding square footage is you measure the outside walls. And when you measure the outside walls of boulders that are 9 feet thick, you get a skewed number. So it's more like about 4,500 square feet.
I asked Realtor Preston Westmoreland to show us around.
We used to call it the "Oh my God" house because people invariably would come in and look around and they couldn't believe what they were looking at, and they go, "Oh my God," you know.
The boulders almost seamlessly blend into a modern southwestern style home.
This is the most amazing sight people have when they come into this large great room. And you've got this huge monolith of boulders about 95 feet long and maybe 25 feet high. You can kind of get the idea of how they hermetically sealed the entire property with glass scribed to the rocks. This large rock here, while it's very stable, they wanted to make sure it wouldn't move, and they've got flying buttresses with steel and concrete to support the bottom of it. You're looking at the big Viga poles, part of the Southwest architecture, which is the only form of architecture indigenous to the United States. And this massive wall of Precambrian rocks with an interesting slit right here. And the people who built the house discovered that on the equinox, a beam of light would shoot all the way across the home and hit the wall on the other side. And it would come across this rock right here. And if you look very carefully, there's a spiral that was chiseled in centuries and centuries ago.
It was just one piece of evidence from the Native Americans who had used the boulders as a home for thousands of years prior.
They could tell the seasons by how the shadows were playing through various holes and cracks in the rock. And they actually chiseled a bunch of petroglyphs into the exterior of the walls, and that put it on the National Register of Historic Places. This is one of the largest exposed rocks in the home. It goes all the way through the wall into the bedroom, and it forms an overhang. If you can look down here, you'll see carbon black on the bottom of the rock where they had fires for centuries and centuries. That's been carbon dated over 1,000 years old. Now this is actually part of a working fireplace, but the builders of the house had their fire over here so they would protect that carbon black for historical purposes. The path to the master suite is a real exciting one. They wanted a feeling of going in a cave to go upstairs to the master suite, and it's very exciting to do. As you take a look at these dramatic granite walls, about 60% of the entire home is covered with natural rock walls. You got to watch your step because they didn't want to destroy a lot of the rock, so you're walking just on the natural bedrock, and they wanted a really neat, inviting entrance. And it's almost like you're spelunking, you're going in a cave. So this is just the most unusual entrance to a master suite I think anybody's ever seen. And then you have a kind of a whimsical door that goes to an upstairs balcony for the master. There wasn't room for a whole fireplace, so they have half of a fireplace morphing out of the rock. The property that the Boulder house is on goes to the Whisper Rock Golf Course. And we're near the old Carefree Studios where Kenny Rogers filmed the movie The Gambler at an old west ghost town that was across the hill. There are 3 bedrooms and a number of different air conditioning zones. It's very comfortable inside. Some places you just don't want to sleepwalk, you know. In one of the guest bathrooms, they had an artwork made of a sink that looks like it's carved out of rock, almost like a Flintstone sink with rock knobs. Here you can see the outside of that slit in the rock that makes the Equinox beam. And I think, again, the amazing engineering and being able to cut glass and seal it into the rock to seal up the house. And then below, there's a cave right here. This cave actually goes up, right up to the house.
When the original owner moved out, they sold it to a Native American tribe.
This house, it took about 50 million years to build, but it's pretty solid.